Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have something in store for us that's going to be really cool. Today we're at the Deer Valley Petroglyph Preserve, and that is just inside the Phoenix area. Now at this location they have not only a museum but a massive amount of petroglyphs that are actually into this mountainous area behind us. I'm really excited to share this with you because this is something that is really unique and talks a lot about the culture of the area and the first peoples that were here. So today we're going to go down this path and get started. The preserve is a monarch way station and also welcomes countless other small critters. And you can see here as we go down this path, this beautiful area with all of the landscape that is just swarming with life. I can see birds bouncing around on the trees in the distance. I can see little butterflies hovering and bees. And the mood here is one of a relaxation. But as we go down this path, you'll notice that the building itself is covered in these stones which mimic the actual mountain itself. This preserve is an architectural beauty, and it was created so that it would blend in with the surroundings and create a natural space so that the animals in the area would be able to seek comfort and not feel threatened in their environment. This is also a wonderful place for us to learn about some of the vegetation of the area. And as you look out into this expanse, you'll notice small signs like these that are kind of around telling you about the various kinds of vegetation. The fact is, this is a beautiful way to start an adventure, being able to just look out and see some of the nature swarming about and really take in that even though you're so close to the city, you feel so far removed. But we have a lot of adventuring to do, so let's go inside. Okay guys, we're going to start off today by going into the gift shop, and I actually looked around and found something very exciting. Check this out. This is what I found. I'm so happy. This is a perfect way for us to start off our adventures, and then we're going to follow that up with this right here, which is our trail guide. It's our visitor guide. It's going to tell us a little bit more about what we're going to see in both the gallery and then also outside. We also talked to them a little bit at the front desk whenever we paid and found out that there's actually a person out closer to the petroglyphs that we can chat with. So I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be a great interactive experience where we can see something historic, but also where we can get some more brain wrinkles. So let's take a look around the first gallery area, which tells us a little bit more about the history of this location. Starting off with our first display, we learned that rock art is global and it's a part of human history that tells the tales of the people from around the world. And here there is a map for context of some of the places that they have found petroglyphs, including, of course, these here in the United States, but you can find them in every continent. And I think that that is pretty awesome to know that the ancient people, the people who were the first people, were all communicating and telling their stories in a unique way, their own written language. Now this language from place to place would vary, and here you can see something that would have been featured in Hawaii. These are small hollows that were created in a rock surface, and they would make a depression that would be formed that would look like this. This found in Blythe is actually something that was created by removing pebbles and large stones to form something on the ground surface that could be seen from above. Of course here, these are rubbed and scratched into the stones, so it's a little bit different how that they designed these, and so you can see the difference from place to place. And going across the ocean to France, you can actually see pictographs which were actually designed onto the rocks and painted using minerals or organic paints. Now why is it important that we learn about each of these? It's because each group used their resources around them to communicate things that they felt to be important, to help steer others, to tell stories stories to pass down traditions. And it shows that despite the distance between these people, that there was a static form of communication within each one, and they knew that storytelling was super important. And so as we move forward, we get to learn a little bit more about why they found these, how that they were studying them, what we have learned from them, and what it tells us about the people that came long before us. In fact, here we ask ourselves, why were the Hedgepeth Hills studied? And here we learn that before the construction of the Adobe Dam project was commissioned, there was an archaeological project that began in 1980 and took approximately 6 months to complete. And in 1994, the trail and the museum that we're standing in was actually developed. Now, in this dig, what did they find exactly? They found 1,571 different petroglyphs on 579 boulders. But in addition, they found some structures. They found fire pits. They found a pit house. They found ceramics, and they even found trash containing pottery fragments of the time. Now, this is the historic photo from the wall as they documented the boulders and the various petroglyphs that they found. And here you can see it just looks like a black and white photo. However, but down below they actually have marked where each one of these is found. And it's kind of interesting to see because boulder 66 is actually highlighted right here in the yellow. But what's on boulder 66? This is actually boulder 66. You can see that they documented each and every stone that had a petroglyph, and then they also used these little signs to tell you which area they were located in. Going back to this, you can see that there are small lines and markers to section out, so it would be easier to know where each photo was taken from so that they could study and see if there was a correlation between the stories. So what did they learn? Well, that's the fascinating part. They learned that there were 3 separate settlements that would have lived in this area and traveled through here. They also learned that petroglyphs were typically depicting things that were activity-based things that they would be doing in this area. For example, they would depict hunting or harvesting or grinding or cooking. And through these different glyphs, you could see the stories and how that they would change from person to person, and how that they would document this in a way that was very interesting and super fascinating. And because of that, they were also able to kind of see the shift between these people displayed on this rock. It's as though one group would leave their story and then the next would leave their story. And that's kind of cool also. But let's learn a little bit more. The documenting of this process took a long time. And as you can see, each and every one of the glyphs that were found had its own separate form. And in this form, they would make notes about when it was found, where it was found, how large it was, and then also they would have a primitive drawing which would match that of what they found. And they would do a line drawing, and that would be a portion of the record that they would keep on file for future studies. Now, this area looks very different now, but in 1980, this is what Hedgepeth Hills actually looked like. There were no real homes around it, only a couple of small buildings, and the yellow arrow is an indicator as to where they found in this giant hill the petroglyphs. So it's interesting to see how they randomly come upon one section, and it has such a high concentration of these. And so they knew it must have been of importance. Now, for those of you who are interested in finding out a little bit more, they do have some archaeological books here in the gift shop area, but also they have this video, which is from the original 1980, like discovery and unearthing and also excavation. So it's pretty interesting to just kick back and see a little bit more of this. And you can see what exactly they were doing and what this process would have looked like in real time. So that's also accessible to us. But let's look at some of the tools for which they study these items. Now, artifacts that were discovered and could be removed were removed and safely taken into the lab and examined more closely using a variety of different tools, including microscopes. They also used additional tools for measurement, and they were able to find the chemical makeup of items like these that were found left behind. And this is what has allowed them to not only learn about these people more and what they were using, but also to date these items. items. In fact, during this excavation, you'll find several pieces of ceramics that they did find here, and they're all very unique. You can see the various colorations, you can see the different patterns, and you can see that some of them almost look like they have a glitter inside of them. It's very fascinating to see how each of the individual things that's represented likely tells the story of a different group of people. And here we learn a bit more about the three groups that likely left behind some of these glyphs and also ruins. In fact, the Patayan, the Hohokam, and the archaic people of this area were linked to this very site. The first people that inhabited this area were the Western Archaic, and they were actually here anywhere between 8,000 BC and 3,000 BC, and they lived in the Deer Valley area. Now, they were commonly known to move in order to find food, and they have said that they have linked the more interesting and squarish patterns to this particular group. In fact, a lot of the geometrical shapes in general are linked to this group, and this was one of the earliest groups, so it's kind of interesting to see that way back 8,000 to 3,000 BC, they're finding these pieces, and then they were able to have a clear determination that there was a different group that came after that, and that's when we get into the Hohokams. Now, this particular group was very agriculturally based, and so they would come to an area that had water, and they would be able to use elaborate irrigation systems in order to make sure that they had water watering their crops. And they are credited with a lot of different really unique facts around the Phoenix area, but they actually inhabited this area between 450 and 1450 AD. And so a huge shift in the timeline there from the first people to the next group of people. But there's a little bit more that we should know about these people and what exactly we will find out here from them. In fact, here is a really nice bio about the people and also some of the things that they engaged in, including that they were the ones who engineered the expansive canal systems, just like we talked about. These are the ones that are credited for most of the Pueblo Grande area. And you can see here that quadruple-like figures are attributed to this particular tradition. Now, there isn't a time associated with the last group. However, the Patayans are also linked to this area, and they could see this through some of the different artifacts that they found, and then also some of the interesting glyphs that they found that matched others that they had found in other places. These people primarily lived in the West, closer to the San Diego area and in Southern California, so it made sense for them to make their way over to Phoenix. However, it's also kind of interesting to see the differences on how their style and some of the others would have been. It says right here that they were actually skilled fishermen and hunters and farmers, and they persisted long after the Hohokams and the modern tribes such as the Yavapai and other Native American communities throughout the Southwest maintained cultural ties to this tradition. And here you can see an illustration of what life in one of their villages might have looked like. Now, because we have learned a little bit about the people who have been here, it's now time to talk about the people who are still here. In fact, a lot of people still stem from these very tribes, and so whenever we come out to these places, not only is it an educational stop where we can get some brain wrinkles, but it's also a place we should respect because it is sacred to those people even to this day, because it's some of the first written works from their people. And so there's a display here talking a little bit more about respect, and it actually has one of these speaker cloches that you can go under and hear something pretty interesting. Definitely encourage you guys to check that one out. I'm going to leave that one for you all. Now, inside this gallery, we find a bit more of a complete section of the ceramics in this display, but we also have some beautiful photos which have been taken in a variety of different locations showing off some of the petroglyphs. But then as we turn, there is a panel display that walks you through a timeline and tells you a bit more about some of the archaeology and some of the different sites that we could find and how that they have excavated them, the legacies that they have brought, and what we have learned. In fact, through these findings, they have found out more about architecture and farming and, again, the people and the culture, and how that they would be nomadic and how some would be static, and how the villages would work and the infrastructure of the people there. It's amazing what you can find whenever you go into an area that is no longer inhabited, and just by the things that have been left behind, the stories that you can tell. And so that's why sites like these are so important, because they are telling the stories to us of the people who paved the way for us to be here. In fact, if they wouldn't have set up the canal system here in the Phoenix area, no one would have. It was the Native Americans who inspired the people who then came in and made the more realistic canals that we have today. They were the ones who fashioned them. They diverted the water. They did all of those things, and it made Phoenix possible. And because of that, Phoenix is now the thriving place that it is. So with that said, let's go check out a couple more areas in here, and then we're going to go outside. There is a nature trail, which is about half a mile altogether. It takes you a quarter mile to get out to the glyphs themselves. And then once we get out there, we will be amazed. Now this display is actually pretty fascinating. It asks you to think about what this language system might be about, because some of the different things that we have found, we don't fully know exactly what they're saying. Rock art can't be read like our regular language. It's more like Egyptian hieroglyphics. And because of that, the language system was not written down as a code. No one needed the little translating key because they would just communicate in their own special way. So we rely heavily on the indigenous people and the first people of today to help us explain some of these patterns as they are still used in their culture today. In fact, the very symbol that we saw when we walked in right here, they asked, does it represent two deer? Could the deer represent a group of people or a clan? Could it mean expression like swift as a deer? Right here, what do you think that this would mean? Now, on the same note, it asks us, what will people think about us in 7,000 years? And that's a good question. Right now, we think that we're the center of the universe, and we have books and written text and things like that that document our stories. However, will our stories and our language be like that of the first people that were here at some point? Will someone not understand those? Will our stories make any sense? It's important for us to realize that as much as we want to be the center of everything, we are just in a passing moment. And so we need to appreciate that moment, take care of that moment, and in the future, the people who come after us, maybe they'll see by the acts that we did instead of the words that we said. That's my thoughts. Now we learn a bit more about some of the pottery that's been found and where it has been found and what it's been linked to in this section. And there's some super familiar pieces in here that I'm very excited to dive into in this case. It is nice, however, to be able to go from the actual pottery to a map that shows you not only where it might have come from, but also the people that would have been associated with it. Now, one more thing that we might ask ourselves when we go outside, why does the rock look like it's from a volcano? Well, in all reality, about 10 million years ago, we actually experienced a shift, and that did create most of the grounds that we're going to see today. It has been a long time here, and you'll see various points throughout Arizona that actually look like this. It's like you're going to the moon or something. It's really fascinating, but that's why this looks so much different than so many other adventures that we've been on. With that said, it's time for us to go outside, I think. I might have one more display for you guys, though, just before we step out the door. In fact, here we have an Arizona archaeological timeline that starts out way back in 2000 BC and goes all the way up to 2000 AD. Along the way, you can find several different people who have come through this area, but also several interesting things. For example, in 1912, Arizona became a state. In 1929, the first city archaeologist was actually hired. In 1935, the Historic Sites Act was passed. And then in 1966, the National Historic Preservation Act was passed. So all of these things are very important to the overall site that we're seeing today. And so I'm super excited to have shared them with you. Okay, so now let's talk about what we're about to experience as we go outside. As you can see, this is our map, and we are at the start right now. We're going to go down past an amphitheater, and we're going to start reaching the geology down here about halfway through. As we get to the glyph site, there are a whole bunch of little numbers, all of which are connected through this nice guide. But then also, this is an easy guide that they give you whenever you come in so that you can find some of the more easy to spot ones and then also know what you're looking for. So I think this is a great way for us to start our tour. Not to mention, I did notice that there is a QR code on this to make our experience a little bit more interactive. Okay, now that we've finished up with all of our brain wrinkles inside, I am ready to take on this trail. And I didn't want to do it by myself, so today we are joined by Aussie Van Man. This is Brock right here. He's gonna come along with us. This is gonna be super exciting. Brock, have you ever been here before?
Phoenix? Yeah, I live in Phoenix.
Not Phoenix.
I've driven past the dam wall here, and I never knew this site actually existed. So
it's kind of crazy.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've driven out past here a million times.
So, since he's not been here and we haven't been here, this is going to be an experience for us all. Now, a couple things they do warn you about is that it does get super hot out here, so we should have brought our water if it was a hot day. It's not so bad today. You can see the wind is blowing, and we're going to live, I think. We're going to be fine. However, they did also say there's no rails, so not to get off trail. And then if we do see any trash, we're supposed to pick it up as always, because we are advocates of leave no trace in a beautiful space. So with that said, let's get going. Oh yeah, also they have the sneaky snakes, so be on the lookout, guys. If you didn't hook up with the audio tour off of the actual book, you can also do it right here before you hit the trail, and it gives you a little bit more information at each one of the numbered stops along the map. So this should be pretty interesting, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do that on my smartphone. Okay, I went ahead and pulled it up, and this is actually through the Smartify app, which a lot of museums use, so I've used this before. It's super user-friendly, and all you do is just hover over the QR code, push the link, and it takes you to this particular section, which is exploring the petroglyphs at Deer Valley, and then you can start this, or you can download this so you can listen to it later. Now, I find this to be super useful if you come back to a site or want to revisit your photos from a site so that you can continue the knowledge journey, because sometimes we want to be in the moment just looking around. Also though, this is nice to start and then just kind of walk with. So it gives you all of the different stops along the way that you'll be able to push a button and start with, and it tells you a little bit more about each of the areas and dives in anywhere between 24 seconds and it looks like a 2-minute audio for each. So this is kind of cool. I'm super excited about this. So let's push play and get started. Okay guys, this is stop number 2, and here we find 4 boulders that were originally located where the dam is actually built into the hillside, so they had to move them. And if we look over, you'll notice this is our first signs of some of the petroglyphs, and it's pretty fascinating to see the designs. This one right here looks almost like it is a ladder almost, but it's connected, so maybe it's a snake or a worm, or again, we don't exactly know what this stands for, but it's really interesting. And then over on this one, we see something that we've seen in a lot of places. Do you all see this? We've actually seen several patterns that are very similar to this at ancient sites. I'm not sure what exactly its symbolism is here. However, this is just pretty fascinating. I'm going to actually consult our visitors book real quick and see if they have any indicators as to what these might be. Okay, there's no spiral, but Brock did find the squiggles, and so those were probably from the Patayan people, and that's interesting. So those were the later people to this area, but it doesn't have the spiral still. Now, one of these days I'm just going to buy a petroglyph book because they do have some indicators as to what some of these might be symbolic of. But for the time being, it is interesting to come and check out the different points and just kind of connect the dots from site to site. Again, I've seen these all the way up by like the border of Colorado and New Mexico. And so it's really fascinating to see how much that people really were nomadic. In fact, I think it's a really interesting indicator as to how life was. And being a nomad myself, I feel as though there's some kind of interesting connection to that, because a lot of people now more traditionally are static, and I don't think that we are by nature meant to be static. I think that from the beginning of time we've always been nomads. So it's interesting to see some of these things. But I see something also in the distance that is not cool. I think you know where this is going if you've watched my channel. No. Just no. Now, one of the reasons that the people came to this area was because of the readily available supplies for them to be able to thrive. And here we find some of the ways that they would have used the volcanic rock to actually use it to grind things. And so here there is a display where you can see all of the various types of grinding stones that they might have used at that time. Aha! There is a sign about them. Unfortunately, it doesn't offer us a lot of solace in knowing what they are. So right here it says that these are very popular in the Southwest, which is why we've seen them at several different sites, but we can find some right over here. So let's go get a little bit of a closer look. As we get to stop 7, we learn a little bit more about the desert lichen. And it asks you, have you ever noticed what happens to look like brightly colored plants growing on the rocks? They're red, they're green, they have white spots, but they're not actually plants. They're various versions of lichen. And lichen is a composite organism that's produced by the interaction between two other organisms, which are algae and fungus. So it's a really interesting thing to see. And whenever you go to rocks like these, it really starts to stand out. It almost looks like there's a rust on the rocks. It's really cool. And as you look at the rocks, each one of them has a different pattern and a different kind of lichen. So you'll see different colors really appearing in different places. Oh, we found a sign to direct us toward some visuals, but I also found something with my Where's Waldo eye that isn't mentioned. So I'll show you what's up about 20 feet per this sign. Now, did you guys see that little piece that I showed you there at the end? It almost looks as though they've etched 1980 into the rocks. Now, I would think that that probably wouldn't be the case. Maybe it's just the angle, but it's wild to see because it's interesting to see the overall context of the people who've been here and the markings that they left, but then to think that there is also that. Now, something that I want to say at this particular time in the video to you guys, if you're ever in a public space, do not leave your mark. Don't do it. We're disgracing the land around us if we do, and let's not do that. This is an ancient communication. It's a part of history. Your Instagram tag is not. Here we reach the kissing deer, and this is the petroglyph that we saw actually inside, and they were asking, what would you think that this means? So it's interesting because it says here that some have speculated that it could be deer drinking water, with the thinner deer being the reflection. Others suggest that it could be deer fighting, but whichever one it is, the stone right in front of us tells a lot of stories. Now again, there are over 570 some odd stones that have petroglyphs on them. And so as you're looking up, you'll see little faint designs kind of scattered throughout this section. And I see one that I'm going to try to highlight by zooming in just a little bit that doesn't have a sign, but it's just kind of interesting. And then I'm kind of just taken aback as I'm looking at the various colorations of the stones, because that's how you're able to really indicate that you're seeing a petroglyph. It's just a slight discoloration, and in seeing it you can then make out designs. And I'm sure that at one point these were much more bold. However, now, over time, the weathering, the erosion, the things that have happened, it's taken some of this history and turned it into a much more muted looking symbol. But it's very fascinating still, and it's amazing to see how they would get up to some of these because they're way up there, which leads me to question, why? It does tell you here to take a moment to observe things and let your eyes adjust a bit more, and then they will start to become more and more apparent. So the tiny squiggles and and the little designs that are somewhat hard to see start to come into focus the longer that you are here. In addition, they do have someone who is actually down here on the trail at the very end to talk to you a little bit more, help you locate some of them, and to also kind of give you some more information and context. So between the audio tour and the personalization of that person being here, this is a great place to see history, and I really appreciate that they have this here for all of us to come and see. You could literally be here all day, staring up and seeing very small, tiny, intricate details. And it's really fascinating as we're kind of glaring upward. Brock.
Yo.
This is awesome.
It is very awesome. I love seeing the petroglyphs in their natural area, not removed. So it's very cool to see the exact petroglyph where it sat when they were carving it.
Right? And the concentration of them is wild here. There's so many. It's just interesting. Not to mention, a while ago, we found a little lizard guy, and he was doing some push-ups. What kind of lizard was that, Brock?
That was the Chuckwalla.
He's really cool, and apparently they can get up to 12 feet. Now, the guy that we saw was not 12 feet, but apparently he comes out to a similar spot every day and basks, and the guide here was actually telling us that she's gotten some really cool photos of him, and we were fortunate enough to be able to get a little zoom in on him also, and check this out. Well, that was super fun, and we also got to see a squirrel munching up in kind of the flowers, and just kind of learned a little bit more. Now, we learned that the lizards that we saw, the males are actually a little bit more vivid, so they have the differentiating colors. The females are more of just like a gray color so that they can blend in and stay a little bit safer. They're also a little bit smaller. Now, that was really neat, and I just totally geeked out there for quite a while. As you can see, this site offers a lot of history, but it also gives you a lot of nature. Keep your eyes open whenever you come though, because they spotted a snake out here just last week on this very trail. So bring water if you're coming during a hot time. Keep your eyes kind of on a swivel and have fun. Now, as we walk back toward the visitor center, I'm very excited, and this has just really uplifted me. Coming to places like this with the natural space and getting out there and just being active really invigorates you. But then when you can get brain wrinkles on top of that and see something you haven't seen before, like I did today, oh, we're leaving this place with a big smile and a lot of new knowledge. This is really cool to see yet another site along the way that kind of ties together in the overall picture of the places that exist out there for us to explore. I'm really happy that we came here, and I hope you guys are too. Remember guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time, and exploring the world around us is definitely that. Till next time guys, bye!